Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, yoga and meditation, their purpose is actually contained within an understanding of the actual words themselves. It's interesting how in the past, about 50 years or 40 years, how widely the word yoga has, it's become known and used, and people are engaging in what they understand to be yoga. But the word yoga literally means union. This is the derived yuj, is the Sanskrit base for the word yoga. And it is used, for instance, in the term that when you yoke animals together, like in plowing, and there is a wooden thing that fits over the neck of two animals to pull a plow. This is the nature, to tie together, for there to be a union. And of course, the big question is, if I do some asana, am I experiencing a union? And most people will answer no, but I feel really good and I'm relaxed and becoming stronger and my metabolism is better and all those good kind of things. And that's wonderful and is deeply encouraged. But what I'm going to offer is that there is a deeper and extraordinary purpose behind the actual practice of yoga and of meditation. Many people may attempt meditation in different forms, or what they consider to be meditation. For instance, the idea of not being distracted by things and finding a peaceful space and bringing the mind into focus. But in the traditional practice of meditation, these activities were considered pre-meditation. They were for the purpose of stilling the mind, and which is like, oh my God, mission impossible, right? Stilling the mind, bringing it into a place where it's not jumping all over they call it the monkey of the mind. And there was a very profound appreciation of a certain reality, that the mind was described as potentially the greatest friend, but also potentially the greatest enemy of the individual. And all we have to do is, if you know somebody struggling with addictions and struggling with profound mental health issues as they describe it, we will see how the mind can pull one into the depths of profound unhappiness. So they describe the reality that it was the unbridled mind that was a great source of problem for the individual. Unbridled means uncontrolled, where we're not actively participating in the control of the mind. Rather, we are simply following it everywhere and following everything that's going on. So many people feel that meditation practices really help them find a place where they feel at some peace, or they feel some restedness. The very big problem, though, is you will find that this type of practice is not life-altering. That one can have that experience, but then they step out into the world and everything that they're doing, and again they're caught up in perhaps chaos, or getting pulled in multiple directions, experiencing anxiety, feeling really troubled on many levels and in many ways. So then they go back, and the next day, if they're doing it, they have a daily practice to their meditation to try and get grounded and to try and make it so that they can face the world. But it's just this ongoing cycle. Every time you have a good experience, then you go out and deal with the world. You're almost back to square one. The practice of actual yoga and meditation is meant to be completely transformative. It is meant to give you tools to manage the experience of life. And the way things are managed will always be to developing a new perspective, a new way of seeing things, a new way of seeing ourselves, seeing others, and seeing the world. This will automatically occur if one is engaged in a genuine meditation process. One of the things that people frequently embrace is the idea, or the thought, and the idea that meditation is a mental activity. It's an activity of the mind and with the mind. And that is actually not the case. It's not a mental activity. Meditation means that I come to rest my heart, my mind, my very being in that which is transcendental, that which is spiritual. And so the example I often use, it's like on a really hot summer's day and you go out to the beach, and it's kind of like you're really feeling hot and sweaty, and maybe you've been engaged in some work. You might have been doing a workout, and I mean, this can happen in your own home, stepping into the shower. But the idea of immersing yourself in the cooling and cleansing water, and it really changes things. And that image is what I would encourage people to try and cultivate in relation to real meditation. The form of meditation that we use is to use spiritual sound. This is a kind of a big subject, but just in summary, this is sound that has come from a spiritual platform, a spiritual dimension, and it contains a unique potency. And when we rest our heart and mind in the great and warm ocean of spiritual sound, then it has a very profound effect on us, a very great effect. I was going to read you something. I saw this a few years ago, and I'll read it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. It was a woman had written a blog post, and when I read this, I was quite startled because she was so honest and very vulnerable. She was really wanting to look at things, obviously, in a way that we're discouraged from looking at things. So I'll read. I have almost everything that people talk about when it comes to happiness. A good husband, a great job that I enjoy and pays me well. But here I am, feeling all confused, blank, and painful. I feel numb, suffocate, and lifeless. For all the reasons I could think of, I should be grateful for the life that I have and be happy about it. Yes, I am grateful, but I am not happy. I feel guilt for not being happy. I cannot talk to anyone. No one can understand. Even I cannot understand. Everything is so quiet. All I can hear is my husband's breath and the sound of my wall clock. I feel so lonely. I feel like I am the only person in the world to have this feeling. This feeling overwhelms me. It eats me alive, and I find myself lost in it piece by piece. I find myself pushing people away because I think they don't truly understand me. I try to build a thick wall around me to protect myself and my lonesomeness. Behind the wall, I have the whole world of my own. Except there is nothing in that world. I know it is not healthy for me to stay in my world forever. I know it is time for me to break the wall, but I just don't know how. Is that moving? I think every single one of us can relate to that. And it clearly indicates that elements of it, if not all of it, is something that I experience or have experienced. And it opens up this enormous question about what is it all for and what is it all about? And where do I find refuge? Where do I find true happiness? Because these are desires that we all have. The practice of yoga and meditation is meant for addressing these issues. And not just addressing, but actually solving these types of problems. The great foundation for all yogic practice, and meditation is actually considered part of the yoga system of yoga practice. The great foundation is this inward journey to discover who I truly am. We all live in a world where we are strongly committed to the idea that the body that we have on is us. We are absolutely convinced of that. And yet, it is a great untruth. And this is an astounding idea. This is an astonishing idea that you are the resident of this body. You are the one residing within. You are eternal. The body is not. You will reside within this body for some time, and then you will be required to leave. It doesn't go anywhere else. This is a fundamental reality. And we experience in different times this reality, and in different ways. I was at this place, when was that? Yesterday? Day before. At speaking to some people, and I just recounted, as I have already done twice, and it's kind of quite appropriate in my visit here to Melbourne. I remember a time when I was a young hooligan. I grew up in Te Aroha in New Zealand, little town, 3,000 people, and we were part of the wild bunch in the town. And I had a friend, and this is reasonably early teenage life, and we're just preoccupied with racing around in cars and drinking copious amounts of alcohol until weed showed up, and then that was the new thing on the block, and it was just, and everybody's just looking to find someone to hook up with. And I'm in the car with my friend, and he's got a girlfriend, and she's bitterly complaining to him. And the statement that she made was, "You don't really care about me. You're only interested in my body." Sex-crazed teenager. And it's just like, wow, what an astonishing thing to say. That was kind of quite mind-blowing for me. And I didn't understand the significance until quite a bit later in my practice of yoga, which I had taken up when I was about 14. And it was just like when I began to cultivate some of the great wisdom in yoga and understand that there is a distinction between myself and the body. A massive distinction. And this girl had recognized it, but quickly lost the plot again. That you're only interested in my body, you're not interested in me. Well, it's kind of like, well then, who exactly are you? Could the real you please stand up and show yourself? But, we don't. Are you guys okay here with the air and everything? Or do you, huh? Maybe we could open the door a crack or... The process of yoga, one of the monumental fruits is to discover your actual spiritual identity. And then in living a life that is consistent with that appreciation, and a life that actually allows us to taste real happiness. In the ancient Vedic texts, they use an analogy. A guy has got a bird, and it's in a cage. And the cage is a gilded cage and beautifully decorated. And he's so proud of the cage, he's just constantly polishing it and displaying it and becoming somewhat forgetful of the bird inside that has not been adequately fed and is malnourished. And that example is given in relation to our own lives, that we become preoccupied. We live an unbalanced life that is only focused on the experiences of the body and the mind, constantly trying to stimulate the senses with new types of stimulating and exciting experience, which all just passes us and leaves us in the same place, a place of actual unhappiness. The process of yoga and meditation is to restore a balance, to engage in activity where I, the spiritual being, receive spiritual nourishment. And I begin to look at the world, I look at others, and I look at myself now differently. I'm cultivating what is called a spiritual perspective. And it is founded upon the recognition that I am spiritual, that I am actually an eternal spiritual being, temporarily occupying a body. And I've lost the plot because I'm only relating to the body. It's all centered around the body and the bodily experience and the mental experience, not anything deeper, not anything that's actually more profound and moving. The desire for happiness that we all have originates. Well, okay, before we talk about that, just a little bit of terminology. Many people feel that, or they accept the idea of some spiritual component to the self. They accept an idea of a soul or something akin to a soul or something. I don't like using the word soul, only because most people don't have a clue what that means. Most people, if you ask them, what can you say about the soul? And the vast majority of people will say, I have a soul. And my response is, bam, wrong answer. No, you don't have a soul. Because if you have a soul, then who exactly are you and what exactly is the soul? And then everybody's kind of gobsmacked and it's like, where do I go with that one? If you ask many religious and even often spiritual teachers to speak to me about the nature of this soul for 10 minutes. People quickly run out of things to say because there is such a lack of understanding. The Sanskrit, this was the ancient language used in the Vedic or yogic texts. They use the term Atma or Atman. This term literally translates as the self, who you actually are. This is you, the self. So we commonly use the term spirit soul. It's kind of a little bit of a compromise rather than just using soul, that people can sort of relate to it. But even then, it's sort of like, it's a little bit of a vague thing. It's not like something that we're really connected with. There was a process of yoga, a particular path called Sankhya Yoga, where they, in a very profound way, tried to examine the nature of this world and of the material energy to discover what it was that was spiritual. And they established that there were certain characteristics. That which is spiritual is eternal and unchanging. Does that sound like the body? No, it's not. Definitely not the body. And it's quite astonishing that in spite of all of the medical evidence, it's sort of like it doesn't twig. Within a very short period of time, more or less around 5 years, every single particle, material particle in your body is replaced. The reality is, the body that you have on now was not the body that you were using 7 years ago, just by definition. It's not the same material. Even the brain, even the bones. I mean, the atomic components of the brain, they change very frequently. There is this constant, in the process of metabolism, there's this constant taking on of new chemical elements and replacing things and things being excreted. And so if I look back at a photograph of when I would say I was 5 years old, and you ask the question, where is that body now? Where is it? And most people will say, well, it just grew and it's kind of, and the answer is no. It's completely changed. There's been a massive turnover of bodies. And it's sort of like, well, what about it? Well, who is experiencing the turnover of bodies? Who is the one that is looking at the photos and going, oh, that's when, and I usually say when I was 5 years old, when I was 10, when I was 20, when I was 30. But actually, you are not 5, 10, 20, and 30. That's the body. You are the constant principle. You are the identity that's always saying, oh, that was me. I was there. I was there. I was there. You are the constant principle. So there's a few realities. We're not going to go into it very deeply, although some people might find this is already quite deep. Actually, it's pretty far out. It's kind of like, oh my God, Really? I've never thought about that. You know, we're lost in selfie world. I really dislike this whole trip where you take a picture of a body and it's described as a selfie. That's who you are. And what a formula for unhappiness. Because then you will be committed to the idea that depending upon how my body looks, it will determine whether I am acceptable, lovable, likable, worthy. And it's just like, oh, that is frightening. And that's a disaster. Because the nature of the body is, it comes into being. There is a period of growth. Then there is a period of maturity or existence where there is often procreation. And then it begins to go into decline. And then it goes into rapid decline. It's shocking. Yeah, my body's already like 73. And now I'm feeling the rapid deterioration. I've always been very active and things, or I say me using the body to be really active and, stuff. And now all of a sudden, just doing things like, you get anybody about 60 onwards, and they're standing on a table this high, and you ask them to jump on the ground. A little kid just goes, ping! And if you land bad, you just roll and everything. And the older person looks at it, and then they get themselves all ready, and it's kind of like, God, I hope nothing goes wrong here. And you can get a serious injury just jumping off something that high. It's like, what's with that? And it gets infinitely worse. You start off in nappies, and you end up in nappies. Your body can age so much that you can hardly digest. You can't even use the bathroom anymore. That actually you do need diapers, nappies, and somebody's got to change them. And it's kind of like, it feels so degrading for the person going through that experience. Because you went through a period of being strong and carrying the load and supporting family or others. And, you were the one out in front carrying everyone. And now you're like a baby again. You can't even feed yourself. You get Parkinson's or something, or Alzheimer's. And it's just like, oh my God. It's just like, really? This is it? And of course, if you're lost in the world, that the body is the self, then yeah, that's it. And that's rather tragic. That's rather sad. In the yoga system, there was a cultivation of wisdom, this knowledge of who I truly am. Our desire for happiness is not something that is a creation of the body or of the mind. It is actually a spiritual need. That is why we are constantly seeking happiness. Even if our life has been utterly miserable and we've had so many betrayals and bad experiences, I'm still thinking, there's got to be happiness somewhere. I'm driven by this because it is actually part of our eternal spiritual nature. But when I am misidentifying the body as being the self, then it's like that desire is transferred to the body, at least in my mind. And so I eat, I smell, I touch, I engage in all kinds of sensual stimulation that bring experiences that I might describe as happy, but they are limited and they are definitely not fulfilling. Do you agree with that or not? And something that really upsets me is, boy, am I going to go here? I might get into big trouble. This new focus on what people describe as mental health, which I think one needs to be extremely cautious about. Just because you're unhappy, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. This could be an indication there's something very right with you. That the experiences that you're having are not fulfilling you. This is not a pathology. This is not a disease. This is an actual experience that actually could be a doorway to a great spiritual enlightenment, a transformation. Because the experiences of the body connected to this world cannot fulfill the need for happiness and your desire for happiness. You need spiritual nutrition. You need spiritual experience to actually completely touch you in your heart of hearts, the core of your being. All fear in this world arises from fear of death. It's just like, it's crazy. It's like we don't know that everybody dies. We don't accept it. And when it happens, we're like shocked. And it's so disturbing. And it's because we are eternal spiritual beings. And the idea of coming to an end really goes against the grain. It really upsets us. But it upsets us because we have bought into the idea that the body is the self. The good news is that you never die. You are eternal. You're going to leave. The body will die, but you won't. You're fine. You're okay. This is a natural part of the cycle of what's called life. But because we are eternal, we desire permanence. The idea of a home where we are safe and protected and undisturbed, and it can go on forever. They lived happily ever after. That appeals because it is actually a spiritually driven desire. The problem is, this world is not our home. We cannot remain in this body forever. We cannot maintain our relationships indefinitely. And we should be thinking about that, not oblivious, not trying to deny it and pretend something else. That's unhealthy and leads people to grave unhappiness and deep grief with this experience. But the reason it upsets and disturbs us is because we are eternal spiritual beings. Another characteristic of the spirit soul is the desire for love. Not just the desire, the need for love. In a pure spiritual state, we will exist in the most extraordinary experience of spiritual love. But so the need to love and to be loved is profound. It's real. And it's part of my spiritual being. But when I try to find the perfection of love with temporary and limited personalities, it's never going to completely fill that need. And people experience that. Is this too upsetting or heavy or anything? We're okay with this? This is the good news. These are the answers. This is the answers to this woman's problem that I read about. This is the answer, the cultivation of this understanding. But the cultivation of understanding does not bring about a change of how we are seeing things. The process to bring that change is called self-realization or enlightenment. Enlightenment is not something that you do. It's not something for special people, that you need some special qualification or something. Enlightenment is for everyone. It is the process by which you uncover your eternal spiritual nature, that you experience it, and you live in that experience. This is what it means. So you're not being asked or introduced to an idea of doing something that you're not capable of, or something that you have to acquire. This is part of your eternal spiritual nature that you are being asked to uncover. The cultivation of spiritual wisdom will be very helpful in that it sort of motivates you to some degree, and it gives you a framework for understanding. But the deepest transformation comes from the process of meditation. When you engage in the process of meditation, and as I said, it's not just a mental activity. Newsflash, okay? You're not the mind. Not only are you not the body, you are also not the mind. Oh my God, that's so liberating. You mean I'm not all that crap up there? All that stuff I have to deal with? No, you're not. In fact, you can learn to step back from that. You can learn to become tolerant of the chaos that the mind can produce. And even when the chaos is ongoing, you can find peacefulness. Eventually, the chaos will disappear. But in the process, one has to learn to just tolerate and deal with stuff. I use the example, it's like, you've got a particularly disruptive child. And you're trying to get on, with, say, some work in the house or something. And the kid's just going bonkers. And you tell it, calm down, otherwise you're going in the room. And they don't calm down. So you put them in the room and say, okay, you're going to stay there until you calm down. And then we'll let you out. And so you're going on with the work, and it's still going on in the background, but it's like, okay, at least it's a little compartmentalized. And eventually the kid learns that, I need to exercise some restraint if I'm going to be a social being. We don't live in a world where it's just us. And we need to learn how to interact socially. And that means give and take. And it's so important that people learn this from a young age. Otherwise you grow up and you just can't deal with the world. You can't deal with rejection. You can't deal with challenges. You become so fragile because it's always just been about you. The earlier that you learn that we live within social arrangements, the better. So anyway, the kid's going off in the back room and you're doing what you have to do, and it's all under control and you're doing it, and then calms down. You go over and say, okay, you're going to come out now? You want to come out? Are we going to deal with this properly? Yeah, okay. Open the door, let the child out. I don't know. Is that considered cruel these days? I don't know what's happening to the world. We're just abandoning rationality and principles that make people strong and able to operate in society and make good decisions and not to just be driven by self-centeredness. Anyway, you get the example. That's what you learn to do with your mind. That even when your mind is going off and you understand, I don't have to follow that. I've got a choice. That's going in the back room. And I'm going to get on with my life and things I need to do and things that need to be taken care of. And when it calms down, then I'll pay it a little bit more attention. And it's like, whoa, you can do that? I ran a lot of programs in prisons, and this is one of the things I teach. The idea of delayed gratification, the idea of not impulsively going with whatever your mind tells you. You need to step back and ask the question, is it in my interest to just follow this? Or is it going to have an adverse effect on my life and on other people's lives? Is there a better way to respond and to deal with things? This is a dignified life. And it will mean that we really learn to make wonderful choices and take appropriate actions that produce really good results. If your life is whatever right now and you're unhappy with it, you have to recognize that I have some responsibility, that it was actually the choices that I made, the decisions I made, the actions that I took that have either led to or largely contributed to what I'm experiencing right now. And if I want my life to be wonderful, I have to learn to make really, really, really good choices that produce good outcomes. And this is what the yoga system and what meditation actually taught people. That by prioritizing or balancing things in our life and giving a higher priority to that which is spiritual, it then guided my life, my relationships, my decisions, my engagement with the world. And it produces very wonderful outcomes. I think I'm about done. So, was that worth coming along for? You're always going to say yes. Take time. Some of the things I've mentioned might be quite challenging for some people. And I humbly request that you be patient and reflect on these things. We often don't realize that our ability to process stuff is that we've got all these filters. We've got all these notions and ideas that we've held to be true. And when something comes along that's a bit challenging, our tendency is to just reject it or push it aside or whatever. But just because, something we've embraced so much stuff for so long, it doesn't mean it's true and it's right. Look at what's happening in everybody's life. We have entered a period of time where there is a crisis of unhappiness, where there is pervasive amounts of unhappiness and depression, unparalleled in the history of humanity. If you look at all the statistics, particularly in the last 15 years and more so in the last 5 years, it's just ramping up in a way that's just incomprehensible. And it's sort of like, well, everybody wants to propose, well, we need more of this kind of drugs or this kind of therapy or this kind of treatment. Hey, has anybody wondered, maybe our value system, maybe our purposes, maybe our goals, the things that we're holding to be so important, are actually producing this, are resulting in this. That's another conversation and a very serious one. So what I'm going to do now, what's the time here? There we go. I'm going to just lead you in a form of this singing meditation. It's called kirtan, where I will sing a mantra twice. The mantra will be Om Hari Om, and then you will respond, and then I'll chant. And then what I'm going to propose is we'll just do it a short one, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A. If anybody's got any kind of questions, we'll deal with. And then after that, close out with another kirtan, if that's okay. Om Hani Om. Om Hani Om. Your turn. Om Hani Om. Om Rest your heart in the sound. Hari Om. Om Hari Om. Om Hari Om. Om Oh Together. Om.